Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala khairil mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Kull aam wa antum bikhair. Ramadan Mubarak to each and every one of you. We are entering the 1/3 of Ramadan is already behind us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide you the forgiveness in this first part of Ramadan and make the next 20 days easier for you as you engage in acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah bless you, forgive you, and make it possible for you to be ones that enter into paradise, to be in the company of prophets, of companions, and righteous one. So really, I'm happy for you to be here with me today to discuss a topic in relations to Ramadan and using Ramadan as a way to think of reducing our carbon footprint on this earth. And I think this is a fundamental aspect of understanding and situating ourselves in Ramadan. And I wanted to give you just a preview of what I would like to be covering in this, and then hopefully as I conclude, you'll have questions into what the topic that I covered, and as is the nature of things, you might also have other issues that you would raise, and I welcome those and as we move forward. First, I want to just engage with the topic of taqwa and to contextualize it in relations to the topic that I'm discussing. Then go into a exploration of israf, which is the extravagant expenditures or wantonness in terms of how we engage in the world. Then depart from our textual exploration and just give you a factual record of where the world is at today in terms of poverty and hunger, so we can understand the relationship between Ramadan fasting and reducing our carbon footprint and the relationship to the broader world, and then conclude with specificity of how really to conquer our appetitive self, because at the core of Ramadan is to conquer our appetitive self and then to get rid of the habitual, uncontemplative self that really moves on this earth and walks on the earth without understanding or contemplating of the responsibilities that have been assigned to it. And in between, I'll also add some comments that will be not part of my already prepared talk, and inshallah those will fit into the broader discussion. Now, as we understand in the prescribing of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the verse that this month and possibly the month before we are using to really speak that fasting has been prescribed to you as it has been prescribed to those who came before you. And the causality is given in there, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may attain taqwa. And the term taqwa itself is a very difficult term to translate. It has a complexity to it, and there's a number of possibilities. Some will translate it as fear of God, having awe of the divine. And what I would like to focus to say that taqwa is to have God consciousness, so that you may attain God consciousness, in the sense that the purpose of taqwa is for us, or for the human being that is engaged in fasting and in observation of the month of Ramadan, is to attain God consciousness in all their affairs. Because the command to fulfill the obligation of Ramadan is an obligation that is part of the 5 pillars of Islam. And immediately from this, the purpose of it is that the reduction of your food intake, disrupting your normative habitual self, would result in you actually begin to ask questions and possibly contemplate the real purpose behind your daily affairs and daily life. And one of the most habitual aspects of our daily life is our consumption of food and drink, in addition to our conjugal relations if individuals are married. So in that sense, it's disrupting the fundamental aspect of the norm of the human being. And that disruption should result in attaining or producing in the individual, insha'Allah, a God consciousness in all their affairs. Ali radiallahu an, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu an said, التقوى هي الخوف من الجليل والعمل بالتنزيل والقناعة بالقليل والاستعداد ليوم الرحيل. So Ali ibn Abi Talib says that taqwa is to be understood is the fear of Almighty God, acting according to revelation, contentment or doing with less, or contentment with that which is less, and preparation for leaving this world. So in that sense, Ali ibn Abi Talib is defining for us the term taqwa as it pertains to the understanding of what the taqwa that is to be attained in here. In another aspect of the definition or attempt to understand what taqwa, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, when for the verse ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi, in a sense he says that the meaning of taqwa is to worship Allah and not to disobey Him, and for Him to be remembered, meaning God to be remembered and is not forgotten, and to express gratitude and not to show ingratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in showing gratitude, all acts of obedience to Allah, all acts of worship are actually an expression of gratitude, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given us the ni'mah and given us the ni'mah of presence in this world to begin with, but also the ni'mah of guidance, and therefore all our acts of worship and acts of obedience are actually an expression of gratitude for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now moving from just the basic explanation, and we could actually have a whole discourse and lecture on taqwa, to beginning to look at our appetitive and consumptive self. We have the calamity that we have been inflicted with is this constant appetitive and consumptive behavior that we are living under today. And this is something that the ancients have reminded us of in terms of the calamity of the appetitive self and pursuing ash-shahawat, pursuing desires. And one of the fundamental desires we have is desires to consume food and consume the pleasures of food that is present in the world. From the halal, for that which is halal can actually take us into a larger context, that it becomes that which causes us to fall in that which is prohibited. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها, she said, أول بلاء حدث في هذه الأمة بعد نبيها الشبع. That the first calamity that have inflicted this ummah after its prophet was satiation, meaning filling its stomach up to satiation. And she said, فَإِنَّ الْقَوْمَ لَمَّا شَبِعَتْ بُطُونُهُمْ سَمِنَتْ أَبْدَانُهُمْ. That verily, when the qawm, meaning here the people, when their stomach were satiated, then their bodies became fat and have carried more weight. وَضَعُفَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. And as a result of this, the sumna of the bodies, the excess body weight that has been attained, caused the weakness of their heart. And in here we could also look at the wisdom in this, that we could immediately, from a medical sense, understand that excess weight have an immediate consequence on your physical heart, because the human body is one of the finely tuned, divinely created machine that has a ratio between the heart and what can pump in terms of your blood versus the weight that you have and all what goes into this finely tuned human body that is there. So there is a direct material medical outcome for this excess weight. But also, we could see that there is a relationship in relations to the spiritual heart, that it also weakened the spiritual heart because the spiritual heart becomes indulged in the appetite and in the consumption. And then she said, وَجَمَحَتْ شَهَوَاتُهُمْ, and their desires became unrestrained. That they would pursue all types of desires in relations to this consumption. In another hadith that been narrated to us by Anas ibn Malik رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من الإسراف أن تأكل ما اشتهيت. من الإسراف أن تأكل ما اشتهيت. That it is from wastefulness or wantonness or lavish lifestyle to eat what you desire. It is of lavish, it is of wastefulness, it is of wantonness, it is of extravagance. You could take israf, or the person who is musrif, the person is an ism fa'il, the person who engages in this, is actually is committing an act of israf to eat what they desire. And I understand that these days we have become so attuned that you have an app that you could immediately get online and whatever you desire could be brought into your own house, whether you are doing Uber Eats or all of these new apps that are out in the market. Literally, we have made technology a function of our unrestrained desires, and we think of it as a sign of progress. This is not a sign of progress. The human being progress is the ability to restrain themselves, is the ability to actually think of the end or the overarching purposes of life, not to actually respond and pursue desires in essence with the basic access to tools of technology, whether it's iPhone or whatever tools of technology. And we understand, whether it's from the Ihya Ulum al-Din in terms of Imam al-Ghazali or others, that shahwatul batn min a'zam al-muhlikat, that the desire of the stomach or the desire or fulfilling the desire of the stomach is from the greatest that causes destruction, that causes a person to really be lost in relations to pursuing the purposes of life. And it is also the causality of both the physical diseases of the physical body, but also diseases of the spiritual disease, because it leads to many consequences, whether it's boastfulness, avarice, arrogance. All that is connected to the pursuit of fulfilling the desire of the stomach. And al-Arab qadiman, the Arab of old time, has a saying, al-mi'datu baytu da wal-hamyatu rasu dawa, that the mi'da, that the stomach, is the fountainhead of disease, and withholding or restraining or fasting and withholding from the self any food is actually the fountainhead or the primary cause for cure. So if you want to cure both the physical ailment as well as the spiritual ailment, then for sure take on the restraining the self from consumption. And in here, consumption, food consumption and the excess food consumption. And when we say to people to restrain themselves from food consumption, they think that they only should restrain themselves to 3 meals a day. The Prophet ﷺ said actually he was known to eat 1 meal a day. Today, in many of our normal parents, it's not enough for you to have 3 meals a day, but you have snacks almost every hour, as if we are a grazing part of the creation, and not restraining to understand the relationship between our bodies, in the sense of what we need to consume in order to maintain our physical body, as well as our spiritual body. And then you add to this, and this is in essence a side comment, we have an overconsumption of food, we have an overconsumption of whatever we find in the world, and then we add to it that you go to the gym afterward to burn that which you have overconsumed. And it's a never-ending cycle. If you want to think about a diet program, reduce your consumption. That is the diet program. But if you don't reduce your diet consumption, spending your money by going to the gym to try to burn that which you overconsumed will only let you be on the same, and if not, it's actually accelerate possibly your continued gaining of weight. So this is just a side comment relative to my advice in terms of what would be the way for you to restrain and to deal with the excess weight that we are carrying. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا مَلَأَ آدَمِيٌّ وعاءً شرًا من بطنه. That the Prophet ﷺ said that the son of Adam did not fill a vessel worse than his stomach. So in essence, the Prophet ﷺ directed us to maintain and really consider the consumption that we're having specifically in relations to food. Now you could say, shukran jazeelan, thank you, Dr. Hatem, for getting us the discussion about taqwa and about food, and we're fasting, all of us on this, like, can't you be merciful on us? What is the relationship? I am merciful because essentially Ramadan is 1 month of reorienting your own self. There's a whole literature out there of breaking your habits, 21 days to break your habits. Allah was very generous with you. He gave you 30 days, and you don't have to pay for it, in essence, and it's actually very enjoyable. There's aspects to it, in essence, that people who are really in tune with the purpose of Ramadan are having really joy. They're in a joyful condition, even though that they don't have any food. And if you notice during the regular year, if you don't have a meal with your own relative pattern of 7 meals a day, no, only 3 plus the snacks that people have, you are grumpy, you are actually possibly not having the best of attitude. But in here, again, there is a spiritual grounding in here. So I'm not trying to rain on your Ramadan, but actually to give you to be more purposeful and to elevate our thinking in relations to Ramadan. And that gets me to the next point, to begin to discuss the global condition that we find ourselves, because there is a relationship in here. All our problems begins inwardly. All our problems are inwardly manifested, and then they have an outward manifestation to them. And this outward manifestation is, in essence, often people spend the time in addressing the symptoms rather than the core element or the core disease that is there, which is the inward state. Now, I begin this discussion by referencing a statement on Nafi', where he said, كان ابن عمر لا يأكل حتى يؤتى بمسكين يأكل معه. That Nafi' reports that he's seeing and referencing what Ibn Umar used to do. He said that Ibn Umar, this is Ibn Umar, his action, he says he would not eat until a miskin, a poor person who is in a state of poverty or hunger possibly as well, that he is brought to eat with him. In essence, he saw this as something that would be part of his purpose to relate not only in terms of his own eating, but also to relate to those in the society that have less means in general. And we have many hadith about the Prophet ﷺ. There's a reference in Zad al-Mi'ad where the Prophet ﷺ used to actually experience hunger himself, so much so that he used to wrap stones around his stomach in order to keep him in terms of persevering for the hunger that he was experiencing. And some of his companions were used to tie one stone, and at one incident he had actually 3 rocks that were tied to his stomach. And the reference is that the Prophet ﷺ used to say, they said, وَيُرَى الْهِلَالُ وَالْهِلَالُ وَالْهِلَالُ وَلَا يُوقَدُ فِي بَيْتِهِ نَارٌ. That it used to be that they would see the one crescent moon, the second crescent moon, and the third crescent moon, and they would not see a fire lit in the Prophet's house, meaning that they're not cooking any meat or any meal that is requiring a fire to be lit in the house. So just for us to contemplate in terms of what we think struggle today, sometimes if we don't find even the immediate meal that we expected, we bent out of shape. And you could actually project also in relations to the Muslim world as well as others, where the relationship also between men and women in relations to cooking, responsibility, and so on. So you have many husbands who come, and if they don't find the cooked meal that they expected, then they actually pronounce divorce or engage in such atrocious measures that not only that the responsibility of cooking is in here is in question, but also what we actually take as an example of the Prophet ﷺ, that this is not of the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. So in here what you have is the cultural nuances that gets to be subsumed under a projected or under a distorted notion of what is the responsibility of men and women in a household. And you could see in here that the Prophet ﷺ in his own household did not have a fire lit for 3 months, because if you take about 3 crescent moons, 3 months, that they would not witness. And the Prophet ﷺ never rejected a food, never said anything about the food. If he didn't like it, he just did not eat it, and that's as far as we know from the Prophet ﷺ. Now, Dhunnun, in a statement, he said, "ما شبعت قط إلا عصيت أو هممت بمعصية." That I never have attained satiation except that I have committed a wrong or transgression, or I was about to commit a transgression. So in here, there's a relationship between satiation and also committing wrong actions in general. Now, what I want to shift right now is to speak about the global condition. Where are we at? Now, for those who have possibly read some of my pieces, and so last year I had a piece that looked at the 3 evils of society: militarism, materialism, and racism. And I want to take the materialism part today. This came out from Martin Luther King's speech of 1967. But today, as I'm speaking to you, around the world, there are 767 million people that are living in extreme poverty, with less than $1.90 per person per day. This is an amount that both the World Bank, the United Nations Development, UNICEF, Oxfam, and others, they have this $1.90. It said this amount is impossible to support a healthy livelihood in any part of the world. Now, again, some of you will, yes, we know, we relate to it, but what we're speaking about is that this is our Bani Adam. This is our brothers and sisters from the human family. And also, if you want to have the Muslim part of it, that a large segment of this population exists in many parts of the Muslim world. If you just take out, often the Muslim world tends to be reduced to an image of the Gulf states or an image of one particular country in the Arab world or so. But the reality is that the Muslim world is far more encompassing, and the poverty level and the extreme poverty level that exists is overwhelming. And this is not even thinking about those who are in extreme poverty as a result of war and conflicts, speaking of the Syrians and what they are going through in various refugee camps, whether it's in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey, or those who are now still existing in various camps in Europe, or trying to cross the Mediterranean, or the Afghan refugees, where still a large segment of Afghans are living in refugees, the refugees from Myanmar and what they're going through, and the consequences of the unspoken of genocide in there. And then you talk about the various conflicts that exist in the Muslim world. And then you go to the countries that have distorted economies, distorted politics, and so on. We have a large segment of the 767 million people that are Muslims. And I'm saying Muslims not to exclude and not to speak of the other, but to drive you to the point that these are our brothers and sisters that are across the globe, and therefore it is part of the responsibility that we have. Now, a more drastic statistic that we need to understand. 45% of all child deaths worldwide are from causes related to undernutrition and poverty. That's 3.1 million children per year. 3.1 million children per year. Meaning that there is a relationship between food, the ability to have food, nutrition, and well-being for many children, and the causes of death that we are seeing that are occurring across many parts of the world. Another statistic for us to understand. Around the globe today, there's 328 million children that are living in extreme poverty. So aside from the death, 45% of those who die as a result of malnutrition and poverty, around the globe, 328 million children are living in extreme poverty, which means almost 50% of the world population that is living under extreme poverty are made up of children. Meaning these are individuals that their future horizon is not going to be attained as a result of a lack of nutrition and lack of food in general. Another statistic for us, every single day, 1,000 children under 5 die from illness that is preventable. So 1,000, meaning that by the time we finish today our fasting, there's 1,000 children under 5 that die as a result of preventable diseases that under normal circumstances would actually would be remedied by the presence of basic medicines and clean water. Now, clean water is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيًّا. We have made and created from water, or made everything alive out of water. So water is the source of life, and that's why when astronomers are looking around the globe and around the universe to try to locate if there's water, because if there's water, then life is possible. In many parts of the world, clean water is not available for a variety of reasons. Some of it, the lack of resources that are directed in there. Some of it is direct pollution. Some of it is as a result of corporate irresponsibility. Some of it for basic desertification that occurred that have transformed the region as a whole. Now, what I wanted to give the link to us today. Why would I speak about taqwa, israf, getting a basic understanding of the conditions that exist, and reducing our carbon footprint in the world? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Furqan says, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. That the servants of Allah, or the servant of the merciful one, those who tread lightly on earth, and when the ignorant ones speak to them, they say salama, peace. So I want to focus on the first part, which is to tread lightly upon the earth, and from that I take to reducing our carbon footprint. And this is, for me, is one fundamental purpose of Ramadan. Meaning that we have to tread lightly upon this earth. Now, I have to challenge the notions that people have in relation to what they understand Khilafah to be. Because there is a modern, post-industrial understanding of the position or the status of Khilafah, which I try to translate it as custodianship, as an assignment of responsibility. Now, if we understand that modernity have produced a delinking of the spiritual from the affairs of the society, that also affected and influenced Muslims' understanding of themselves and their presence in the world. Today, Muslims are a modern byproduct of the world that they have came out of, which is a modern industrial world that takes the subjugation of nature, the subjugation of the world as part of the divine purpose. Quote, the divine, this is not what I accept, but this is the modern Muslim, meaning we have internalized a particular notion or understanding of Khilafah that is akin to fit in line into the progressive trajectory of a continuous movement into an evolutionary movement and development, and therefore we have to subjugate the earth and all its resources to the human being and the benefits of the human being. Now, there is verses in the Quran that Allah says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمْ, that Allah has made possible. In here, He facilitated rather than subjugated or allowed you to subjugate. So there is a terminology in here that gets to be used, and as such begins to shape our consciousness, our understanding of our own faith, our own religion, in the sense to be a modern function, a material function, and an industrial function rather than a spiritual function. And therefore, what we need is, again, is to understand that religion and spiritual pursuits have to be understood with a grounding that is more akin to a custodian relationship over the earth and over the world itself. The human being is part and parcel of God's creation in its totality. So, how do we reduce our carbon footprint? One is by reducing our consumption. God did not put us on this earth to consume until we die. Right? In here we have this notion, shop till you drop. Right? That's not the purpose of our presence on this world. It is to actually to use the world, to exist in the world with a sense of balance between ourselves and everything that is in creation as a relationship of responsibility and custodianship. Whether it includes the animal nations, right? Because the Quran uses the term nations when it references the animal. It says they are right? They are nations unto their own. You don't comprehend their speech. So actually the Quran actually says that they have a speech, modes of communication, something that science have right now began to understand. So in essence, this is a basis of a relationship of balance and a basis of custodianship over the world. So reducing our consumption. Now what is interesting in Ramadan, in a number of studies, that actually in certain parts of the Muslim world, food consumption increases rather than decreases in Ramadan. Now, if you think there is like a complete contradiction, a complete total contradiction of Ramadan being a way of withholding, and I know sometimes, we're trying to feel what the poor are feeling. Let me tell you something. The poor don't want you to feel what they're feeling. They want you to reduce your footprint over them, because our overconsumption that is causing them to be in the state that they are in. We have enough food in the world to provide for everyone with excess. It's not a lack of resources. It's a lack of human vision of what is needed to actually make everybody have the food that is needed so they will actually fulfill their God-given right to be on this world. So it's a calamity for us to actually have an excess of consumption of food in Ramadan. So in essence, what we need is to be purposeful and have consciousness in breaking away with the habitual, uncontemplative, appetitive self during this month of Ramadan, because they have an impact on the others. I said in one of the articles, live simply so others can simply live. Live simply so others can simply live. Meaning that there is a relationship in here. Relationship of reducing our consumption so others will have the possibility. Now, I know that someone will say, well, how can I get my food that I am not consuming, or assuming that I want to follow your prescription, I'm not going to consume, and therefore, how is it going to be transferred to others? Well, you have to think and act locally while you're having a global perspective to the issue. I'm not asking that all of a sudden you take your chicken tikka masala or your shawarma and so on and drive all the way across to Zimbabwe or Pakistan or Malaysia or Indonesia or any of the countries or Somalia and say this is my... But what you need is to think about what is on a local level. What is your footprint? What is your impact? I bet that we have in our own mosque some people that might go hungry for many parts of the year. So, and you are unaware of him. The Prophet ﷺ actually said, woe to the person who goes to sleep fully satiated and his neighbor is hungry. And he didn't specify whether that neighbor is Muslim or not Muslim, whether they believe in God or not God. Why? Because in essence, it's a lack of consciousness of your actually neighbors and those who are next of you. So there is a direct relationship in here in terms of our consumption and what we are undertaking in here. In addition, as far as the first hadith, or the earlier hadith, I said that it is from israf, to eat what you desire. Right? It's from israf. It is from wantonness. It's from extravagance. It's from unthinkfulness, to be unthinking about your own consumption, to consume what you desire. And I know in many parts of the Muslim world, including here, Ramadan becomes from fast to feast. It's not enough to have one type of meat. You have to have every meat that God enumerates in the Quran. Right? And I know in some corners you have to even try to make sure that every enumerated type of meat is there, as well as vegetables. So you have to have a chicken, a lamb, a beef, and that which is in between, and fish, and so on. So it becomes that there is an extravagance that is developing rather than a way to withhold from the self, and as such it becomes part of producing and encompassing further the consumption that is taking place. Now the second part of this is in terms of what I would like for people to be, is to be conscious about how they spend their money and how they spend their resources. Our resources, our wealth is entrusted to us. We don't really own it, right? Because we will be asked about the sustenance that God have given us. We will be asked about the wealth that God have given us and how we spend that wealth. So in this sense, can we become a conscious shopper with our own funds and our own resources? Meaning that, and I know in here sometimes we're sitting in Berkeley and organic and fair trade is something that started from this neighborhood, but I would argue that the ancients were far more organic and far more purposeful in how they treated and dealt with their wealth than possibly us today. Recently, in my visit to Kerala, India, I was just so taken by their environmental thinking in the mosques that they had, which actually dates back from almost 1,100 years. So visited mosques that are 1,100 years old. Each of the mosques had a basin of water in there, measured qullatayn, which was the specific fiqh requirement that a water that has reaches the measure of qullatayn does not carry filth in it, and therefore it's pure for acts of worship. But that was not what's unique about these mosques. these water ponds that were used for wudu had fish at the bottom that also helped clean the water that was there. And the water itself was collected from rain. So you had actually rain pipes that were set up from, again, these are mosques 1100 years. The collection of the rain goes to the water basin in there that is used for wudu, and there was no electrical or any of the toxic materials that we use today, cancer-causing toxic material and so on. So you build your house, and all of a sudden you put all within your own house today, all these modern materials that none of the materials have anyone that have makhafatullah, the fear of God in them, in relation to what the material. If it sells, then you put it out, dump it in the garbage, dump it into the market, and then it becomes somebody else's problem. So in here, you could see that this aspect of being a conscious, environmentally conscious, being aware of how to spend your resources and how to make it possible, relative in here, I'm using the example of an 1100 to say that they had consciousness and understanding that today we are missing because we're driven by market forces, and the market forces basically is dictating to us to follow what is fashionable, what is being produced in the market and so on. And again, Muslims during Ramadan, rather than becoming more conscious, my fear for segments of our communities becomes a 30-day fest, an indulgence, and a non-ending shopping spree on a daily basis. In some parts of the Muslim world, and again, the day changes to a night, and night turns to a day. So people sleep most of the day, and then they get up, they eat their iftar, and then they're out in the souk, and again, they spend the whole time in the souk shopping and eating and consuming without an understanding of what really needs to be understood. So how to become a person that is conscious, God conscious, in how you use the resources that God has entrusted with you at this particular time, and to be actually purposeful in this. So God consciousness is not only about standing in there in the prayer and having a focus on the prayer is important, but it's actually to have God consciousness in every affair and every period and every moment in your life. Now, what I want possibly to conclude so we could have some questions for you at this point is that there is a direct relationship between your reducing your consumption, your purposeful engagement in the world, and the level of poverty that is out there. There is a relationship between our status or our individual act and the manifestation of the global phenomena that we are seeing. So what we have to realize is that you discipline your inward, and if we collectively discipline our inward with a purposeful outlook and God consciousness, then the world will be a reflection of our own collective changes that we are pursuing. If we continue to have the habitual self directing our affairs, which the Quran says, "Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bis-su'," verily the soul is commanding to evil, and we have an economy that is directed at unrestrained consumption. We have a politics that is no longer have any type of God consciousness in it. We have social patterns of relations that actually pushes you further away from having a contemplative, reflective, and restraining self. And also, I don't want to leave religion out of the picture, because we also have a type of success theology and a success religion that sees yourself, because it has translated the religious text to fit the modernity that have been articulated in the current period, modern, capitalist, industrial, and therefore we also don't want to say that religion itself was not part of the problem. Rather, we could actually point to such crises that are present in there and have to take really a step back to understand the multiplicities of the challenges that are facing us. I do believe that Ramadan and the month of Ramadan is a divinely mandated program for us to break away from the habitual, appetitive, unthinking self, and to recenter ourselves with pursuing and being in line with the divine purpose. That's why fasting begins by intention. If you don't have intention, you don't have fasting. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That fasting begins by having an intention. And intention in this sense is to orient oneself, get rid of your old, stale, habitual self, and renew yourself back into the world as a person of purpose. Your place in this world is a custodian that has the responsibility. It's an awestruck responsibility that the heavens and earth refused it. The heavens and earth were offered this custodianship and refused it, and the hamalaha al-insan, that the human being have carried it. And to be a person that is deserving to carry it, you have to fulfill God consciousness at all times. Now, I don't want to hear that you can't complain that shaitan is derailing my effort. Shaitan is there, but he's not the enemy. It's on your own self. Shaitan has no power. Iblis just can insinuate. It is your own self that you have to take hold of and rein the appetitive self, rein that self that is looking to devour the world as a way to fill that emptiness that never can be filled. The world, devouring the world, will not fill the emptiness that you have. Only divine purpose and God consciousness will fill it. And what we have today, again, is many people, including Muslims, that devour the world and think that in devouring the world they will reach attainment. They are not. It's a deluded state of affairs, and you are not going to attain this fulfillment except by actually reining this appetitive self and taking hold of your true purpose. Your purpose is to be from a higher purpose that was given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Ramadan is a yearly occasion for us to think and reflect on that purpose, the purpose of custodianship. Now, I want to take maybe some of your question, and I could speak about the environmental calamity, including possibly the withdrawal from the Paris Convention and its impact, but that will be for another discussion altogether. But for Muslims today that you're fasting, it is actually to begin to think of how you can contribute to a changing world and how to contribute through fasting and through purposeful living that is divinely mandated to us, how to live and actualize this in reality by we have 20 days left, so you're still within your range of attainment to be able to do so. So jazakumullah khair. I have much more, but I think want to leave some time for your questions. May Allah accept your fasting, your qiyam, your recitation of the Quran, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us all from those who Allah accepts their fast and accepts their acts of obedience, and increase us in stations, in the companions of prophets, and the companion of the prophets, the companions, and the salihin, and may Allah make us to be ones who are deserving to enter from Bab al-Rayyan, which is the door in paradise that is dedicated and given to those who observe the fast, which for me is a fast that is based on God consciousness and attaining a true purposeful centering of the person in this world. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Can you say a bit more about how the different levels of appetitive restraint that are required of us during our fast throughout Ramadan translate directly into a minimized carbon footprint in the world?
Well, let's begin by the restraining the appetitive self in terms of food consumption. If we just take the basic principle that individuals are eating 3 meals a day, reducing it to 2, you have 1 meal that is an additional meal that could go to someone else. Now, the purpose also in terms of reducing your meal, and this is what gets lost on people, is that you should actually purposefully reduce your intake every day. So by the time you end Ramadan, your stomach shrinks, and that the food that you need to consume is actually less. But what we find is actually, again, what I mentioned is from fast to feast is resulting in overconsumption rather than the reducing consumption. The food that we overconsume can be actually, as a possibility, is to be sent to someone else or be someone else's portion as a result of our excess and unthinking aspect of our engagement in the world, that it does not produce the reduction in our carbon footprint in relations to food consumption. Also, the fact that we are engaging in multiple delights on iftars, likewise, is not actually reducing the footprint. If you're actually, instead of eating 1 type of meat on a normal pattern, you're bringing 4 types or 2 types or 3 types because it becomes a feast, then the purpose of reducing that footprint is not there. So that's also part of reducing your carbon footprint by reducing your consumption of the world and making sure that you are actually having a way that you can measure. There are a number of scholars in the past where they actually used to reduce every day 1 morsel of eating from their plate. And by the time you end Ramadan, what's left if you reduce 30 morsels of food from your plate every day? You already reduced one meal, and the meals that you are left are very reduced. So that's just in terms of food, because again, the food consumption is one of the most destructive aspects at this point in terms of the excess aspect of our food consumption. In the United States, we make 4% of the world population, yet our consumption pattern is unsustainable by any measures of the scientific evaluation. And much of the world right now is attempting to replicate and imitate a lifestyle that is unsustainable even in its own land, where we have in the United States some 40 million people, and some say even 60 million people that live under the poverty line in the United States, where a large number of children are in there. So that's how you make the relationship of reducing food consumption leads to reducing carbon footprint, because the needs of to continue to expand the food production process as a result of waste and overconsumption is really what is confronting us at this particular time.
Yusuf Masood asks, as individuals, we must be aware of our excess and consumption during Ramadan, but what can Muslim community centers and masaajid do to move us in the right direction?
Well, unfortunately, many mosques end up having excess food that is provided, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's end up in waste. So there's a level of waste that is there. So I would begin by the food that is served is to have some measure of understanding of the people that are there, how many people are breaking their fast, and then to make arrangement with the local food bank and possibly some shelters that are around, and to have to build that program into your own mosque and your own center before Ramadan. And I know sometimes people plan the day of, so that has to go into some of the planning. Second, and I know this is part of the Green Ramadan campaign, is to remove styrofoam from the mosque, remove plastic bottles and any use of plastic materials in there, because again, it ends up being thrown out in the sea and the water, and therefore you're actually adding to the pollution. So that aspect has to be in there. Third, I would say to, as much as possible, and I think this is something to emphasize, is to actually try to get some ingredients locally, meaning to see if the food items that you are cooking with comes from the local, either local farmers or local economy, in a sense, because there's a principle: the longer the supply chain of your supply coming for any type of commodity, the more there is pernicious corruption and harm that is there. So again, think of the sweatshops that are across many parts of the globe. So for centers to think, can we link to the local farmers market? Can we link to the local suppliers that could bring us the tomatoes instead of having to have a can of tomatoes that are bought in these cans that has cancerous materials in it anyway? So that becomes part of the thinking process in there. Another element in terms of the centers, I think they should have some level of an awareness of who are the needy within the community and how to make possible to actually make their needs part of building and developing the program in relations to breaking the fast, and how to the consumptions within the community is not really almost heedless to the needs of those who are less fortunate and less able within their own community, and then the broader community outside. So there has to be some of those elements that brought in. And I think the people who were working on the Green Ramadan have a number of other elements in there that also need to be put into practice. I think what we need is to think that collectively we could make a dent and we could make a difference.
Since many of us live in a wasteful society, what are some ways that we can be more mindful of minimizing our contributions to that waste, as well as not being complicit in the wastefulness of the society, particularly during Ramadan?
My emphasis, be a conscious shopper. Be conscious of what you consume. Be conscious to make a distinction between needs and wants, and to actually have a distinction between needs and wants. And sometimes right now, because we're an economy that transfers everything into a must-have, and therefore I would encourage people to be in this. I know it's very difficult for people, but as much as possible to actually make your own food if you are able to do so, and if you're not working in the never-ending rat race where you have to be 2 hours commuting to your job, 8 hours at the job, 2 hours commuting back. So basically, all of your day is just running into that. So I think if you are able to do that, that is very good. It's also important to actually create communities, alternative communities within this broader community. So how many people do you know within your larger circle that possibly could maybe collectively do some or create some levels of alternative patterns of consumption or alternative patterns of engagement in order to reduce this consumption and this impact? So that's, I would say, on an individual level to do that. Again, in Berkeley, we say you are what you eat. That's a very important statement in relations to Ramadan. And our earlier generation, again, they used to be so concerned about what they put in their stomach because they believe there is a subatomic relationship between the consumption and the spiritual. Because, again, you feed the body on the haram, or you feed the body on that which is wasteful and unpurposeful, there is a consequence. There is a spiritual consequence to that. Also, just as the normal behavior, make sure that whatever you do is to begin with the name of Allah on it. And I know people that are so habitual that they don't even say Bismillah on their meal, or Bismillah when you're drinking your coffee, or Bismillah when you drink your water, Bismillah or Alhamdulillah. All these are aspects of actually being conscious of the divine being there constantly with you. So this is one way for us to really be a person that attains God consciousness in Ramadan, in food and in consumption, as well as in our all habitual patterns in general. So what I want to convey is that don't allow your 11 months out of the 12 months to be a habitual engagement, and only in Ramadan you change, and then you come back to the habitual stuff. You should actually come out of Ramadan with a different purpose and a different orientation to the world, and to attain God consciousness in relations to this month, because you have went through a very concentrated program that should center you and align you with divine purpose. And that's, for me, is the what the month of Ramadan and withholding from the sales so you could think about everything that you do. So you no longer are driving the car and parking the car just because you habitually did that. Or you go and just consume your coffee and that's what you're thinking about, just how I can drink my coffee. Or engage in your acts of worship, which is just physical movements, and not reflecting and not have deep thinking in there. Or if you think, many times if you go to some of the supermarkets, and this is something I speak about in the class, you pick a pomegranate seeds, and you flip the pomegranate seeds container, and it's packaged for you in Egypt. Now, you're here in Berkeley, in California. Just think about what it took for that container of pomegranate seeds to be to be collected in Egypt by a farmer, to be sent to a processing plant where they unpeel the pomegranate, rumman, put it in containers, ship it on ships across the water, or if they fly it on airplane, for it to come to a distribution center, and then to be at the shelf of the supermarket and you consume it without thinking what is the impact of that consumption on that farmer that most often might not be able to actually eat that pomegranate seeds. Or in general, I also think about you have chocolate. You have some of the countries that are the major producers of chocolate in the world. They completely dominate the market, yet they have not a single cocoa plant that grows in their own country. And you go to the places where the cocoa plants grow, and you find that those farmers that attend to these plants have never tasted or don't have the money to taste the finished chocolate product that is produced and then brought in at such an exorbitant price for them to have a taste of it. That for you should be a consciousness to understand those relationships, and part of Ramadan is how to align yourself. We're not asking you not to enjoy the pleasures that God have placed on this earth. There's a lot of halal in there, but the halal has limitation to it, between reaching the level of excess, reaching the level of not thinking how that got into your own table, or thinking about the pain of others are essentially what you're devouring without thinking about those who have toiled in order for you to be in that position. And I'm not only speaking about for us here in the US, but across the Muslim world, because you're seeing an obscene level of consumption. An obscene level of consumption. It is also the attempt to try to fill the emptiness, the spiritual emptiness, by just devouring and thinking that you have the most of the products in the world available to you, or you consume more, that all of a sudden you are actually going to be elevated in this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated us by the religion and what He gave us as a path, which is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The world will not elevate us, only the path to Allah will elevate us. And what we need in Ramadan is for us to reorient ourselves to the divine purpose. That is, for me, is what God consciousness is, and that's what Ramadan needs to be undertaken at the local level in order, inshallah, to have a global impact, inshallah.
I think that this question from Liane Y in Indiana touches on what you were just speaking about. It says, isn't the issue of people not having enough to eat more an issue with transporting the food than it is that some people overconsume the food?
No, I think it's overconsumption for sure. There is an aspect of transporting the food from one place to the other, but there is an excess, a tremendous excess of overconsumption, a wastefulness that is beyond belief that is taking place. Just take the Muslim world aside, just look in the United States. We throw in the garbage yearly enough food that could feed a continent for a year. That's just what we throw in the garbage. In certain places also, we actually dump good product in the sea so it will not actually cause a collapse or a disruption of the market price. Right? So again, it's not a matter of transportation, which is, a logistical technology could facilitate. Maybe right now where Amazon is going to use drones to deliver, we'll tell them here's some addresses of 50 million hungry kids around the world. Maybe you could use your drone technology to drop for them meals daily in there. So it's actually a much more complex. And I didn't touch on the other issue, which is really, really very important part that causes this, is also militarism. The world last year have spent $1.4 trillion on military expenditure. 1.4 trillion. The United Nations said we need about $20 to $50 billion to address the global poverty. So there is a relationship of our use of the world resources for a militarism that is basically causing us to have a death global economy versus really addressing the needs of the human being. There shouldn't be any human being that goes to bed in this modern world that we speak of in the 21st century. They should not go to bed hungry, and we should not have 1,000 child die every day as a result of extreme poverty. There is nothing in the human condition today that could rationalize or justify this, and I can't see how we are unable to understand what it needs for us, what needs to be done for us collectively in order to bring an end and a change to this condition. And fortunately, the priority is for militarism and other priorities rather than to address the human beings and what they need. Now we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the children that die, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enter them into paradise. We have a firm belief that they're in the under the oversight of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful, and we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful. But what we need is, what is our responsibility as Khalifatullah fil ard? What is our responsibility as the custodian and the overseer of this world? Every human being that is there, every suffering that is there, we have to take some level of responsibility for us of how to address it and how to solve it. And I think the genius of the human being has to be directed toward that, which is to uplift and to really feed the hungry and cure the sick and make possible for people to have a decent living. Without, again, we're not talking about ending the class differentiation. That's a different issue altogether. But in the current society that we have, there are many things that could be done. Unfortunately, those are not being done. And I would say that Muslims are not an exception to continuing the pattern of overconsumption and being just consumers without thinking of the consequences on the inward state and the outward manifestation of the problems that exist in the society.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Bazian. Inshallah, your words can spark some knowledge in people.
Jazakumullah khair. Jazakumullah khair for being with us and for listening to this session. Inshallah, you will tune to the other sessions that we're having in Zaytuna. Again, we're taking the month of Ramadan to link with you, to engage with you, to share some of our thoughts and ideas and some of the things that we teach and engage with our students in here. Make sure to really extend your support for Zaytuna during this month of Ramadan. We are completely dependent on your support and your contribution, but the most important support that we ask from you is to do dua for our success, inshallah. Your dua is, we need your dua, we need your supplication during this month of Ramadan. Make sure to remember us during the Laylatul Qadr in the last 10 days of Ramadan to really do a dua for the success of this college, for its continued presence and continued development. And also we ask you to do dua for all of the Muslims, inshallah. May Allah make it easy on them in this current circumstances, and also make a dua for everyone in humanity, because we're living in a very calamitous period in human history, and what we need is to really change and alter the conditions, and our dua and supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it possible. So I encourage you to visit our website and make sure to give us your feedback, to get on our mailing list, and inshallah we'll keep contact with you. Jazakumullah khair. And lastly, please visit us in here in Berkeley. We welcome you also to come to Zaytuna at any given time. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.